So, Bo, how are you finding it so far? Nothing too complicated yet?
Oh, no, I've found it pretty well so far. You've done a good job explaining everything very well, even for someone new to all this.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, like I said, the when you do the course, you'll have a lot of fun. A lot of this will then be bedded in. But what we're going to do now is we're going to do the specific DPHI risk management stuff. Now, I created and designed this whole thing. I haven't had much feedback from the campaign managers and the actual operators as to how faithfully they're actually executing it. So this will be a great opportunity to get some feedback from that. You will see that this construct actually assists everybody up and down the line, as well as to maintain the requirements of the Workplace Health and Safety Act. So let's get stuck into it. Who are we missing? Two people entered the waiting room. What's going on here? Dan. Should we admit Dan? Yeah, I guess so. And Paul as well. There we go. All right, I think we've got everyone now. Beautiful. Right, let's rock and roll. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to look at the risk management framework that DPHI uses or is supposed to use to stay compliant. Where are we? Here we go. So we're going to look at the different resources that have been used to create this risk management framework and the duties of officers and workers, the requirements of New South Wales government with response to risk management. This is for all agencies, the policy within your own department, and the Crown Lands risk management process and its framework and how it complies with Commonwealth, state, government, and departmental standards. So what is risk management? Does anyone want to give me has anyone actually studied risk management? It's a bit of a yawn fest, but it's one of those things we have to do these days. Anyone? No? Got no, what do they call it? Risk management champions in the audience? Okay, right. Well, unfortunately, I was the risk contact officer for my regiment. So it was an air mobile helicopter regiment, and I was the one that was responsible for analysing risks, educating people about risks, and then investigating when the risks actually manifested and we had a negative incident. So that was a joyous experience, let me tell you. So what is risk management? Well, on the screen there, we have a number of little diagrams that sort of explain what the concepts of risk management are. So it is a process that protects resources. It is part of a leadership's commitment, and it follows a set pattern. Those are the three characteristics. So the circle on the left there shows that it protects resources and adds value, and it has to have the dimensions of being integrated into your normal work place methodologies, can be continuously improved, uses the best available information, is structured and comprehensive. It's inclusive of everyone that's involved in the operation. It's customized for your operations. It's dynamic because things consistently change and takes into account human and cultural factors that may have an impact on the way that we look at risk and the way that we deal with risk. So those are the different dimensions of any risk management framework, plan, structure, a methodology, whatever you want to call it. When it comes to leadership's commitments, it's part of the design, the implementation, evaluation, improvement, and integration. So the risk management framework should actually undertake all those different manifestations, and leadership must be committed to it, and the individuals within the organization must be committed to it as well. That's the expectation. And how do we do it? Well, on the right-hand side there, we have basically a graphic on how risk management occurs. So we start at the top. We look at the scope of the operation and the context in which it's being conducted. So in our case, the scope is going to be within New South Wales, within the department. The context is going to be aerial inspection of fire trails. So it's low-level flight in a helicopter in a small team environment. And the criteria that we are looking at are the things that we can identify as being something that may pose a hazard to us. We then go down the line, we conduct our risk assessment. The risk assessment starts with identifying the various types of risks, analyzing the risks, and then evaluating them. And evaluating just means putting a value against the risk. So something that is likely to happen may be very, very inconsequential. So it's got a very low value, but something that is unlikely to happen but has a catastrophic consequence ends up being high value. So that's what risk evaluation is. Below that, we then have the treatment for the risk. And then encompassing all of that, on the left-hand side, we have communication and consultation within the teams, upwards and downwards and laterally. On the right-hand side, we have monitoring and reviewing the whole of the risk management process. And down the bottom, we have recording and reporting of any risks identified, any changes that need to be integrated, and reporting any incidents that occur. So this is very important, this one on the right here, because it actually outlines how we do the risk management and the things that we need to consider when we undertake risk management. So hopefully I'll explain this such that you come away and go, yeah, it used to be just words. Now I understand how it works. So let me show you what's gone into the DPHI risk management process. So the dot points on the left there show you the key documents and the key inputs that have gone into it. And the diagram on the right there outlines exactly what happens for you guys as fire trail aerial inspectors. It looks a bit complicated, but once I explain it to you, you'll see that it actually makes a lot of sense. So up here on the top right, we have the Workplace Health and Safety Act, which is a Commonwealth Act. And that's been in effect since December 2011. Down here to its bottom left, we have the New South Wales government, or New South Wales State Work Health and Safety Act. So does anyone know what the differences are between the New South Wales Work Health and Safety Act and the Commonwealth Work Health and Safety Act is? How different are they? Well, what you guys need to do, you need to get copies of both acts and you need to sit down and compare them word for word. That's your homework for tonight. If that doesn't put you to sleep, I don't know what will. But anyway, I've had a look at the differences, and the New South Wales Government Workplace Work Health and Safety Act is almost word for word the same as the Commonwealth one, except where there are specific New South Wales changes based on things like different names of agencies, etc. So if you guys have an incident at work, who do you get to come in and do the investigation? What's the organisation called? Is it WorkCover, WorkSafe, Safe Work Australia? Does anyone know what it is?
Well, they used to be called Work Cover. I
Yeah.
don't know if that's a new name, but
Yeah. So that's a state-based organisation, whereas Victoria has something different and Queensland has something different. So even though they have the same sort of roles, the names are different, and that's why there are differences between the state version of the Act and the Commonwealth version of the Act, because each state might have just a slight difference. But when you compare them, they are it's about 99% exactly the same. So if you are adhering to the State Act, then you are also adhering to the Commonwealth Act. Okay. So what the State Act has the Act, which is enforced and enacted at Parliament in Macquarie Street. And then out of that, just like in aviation, we have the Workplace Health and Safety Regulations that tells you how you abide by the Act, the things that you need to do. Rachel's joining us now. G'day, Rachel. And then the third dot point here, we have the codes of practice. That's the guidelines and things that we can do in order to be compliant with the regulations and the Act. So if we're working for New South Wales, within New South Wales, we should be looking at that documentation there as part of our risk management. So coming over one of the sorry, let me go back. Coming down, New South Wales government and its agencies has to abide by the Act. So within the New South Wales government, they have an internal audit and risk management policy for the New South Wales public sector, of which you guys are a part. Do you know which department within New South Wales government oversees that? It's Treasury. So New South Wales Government Treasury is the risk management overseer for all New South Wales government agencies. And part of that oversight is the Treasury says that all New South Wales government agencies will abide by risk management practices, and we will abide by the international and national standards. So let's have a look and see what the international and national standards are. So coming over onto the top left here, we have ISO, the International Standards Organization. So they have created a concept for risk management, and they have called it ISO 31000. And the latest version of it, I think, is 2019 or 2018. So ISO 31000 2018. The Australian standards have accepted the ISO version of risk management, and we have called it, used the same number, but we called it Australian Standard 31000. Now, guess what? Which came first, the international standard or the Australian standard? Any ideas? No ideas? Okay. What happened was risk management as we apply it, the process was actually created in Queensland in the 90s. It was a world, we were a world leader. I think it was Queensland University or Queensland University of Technology that came up with the concept. People liked it so much that ISO grabbed it and said, we like it, we're going to use it. We're going to make some slight changes only because some of the terminology that the Australians use don't translate easily into foreign languages. So they just molded it to make it international. And then Australia said, okay, we'll start using the international standard. So the international standard was actually the Queensland standard, and then Australia has taken the international standard, which is basically the Queensland standard. So the Australian standard for risk management is called Australian Standard 31000. And Treasury, New South Wales Treasury says all New South Wales government agencies will have a risk management process that abides by the Australian Standard 31000. Does that make sense? Nodding heads? Good. All right. So within New South Wales government, we have the different departments that have to apply risk management to their type of operations. So the badge there says DPIE, imagine that says DPHI. So Department of Planning, Housing and Infrastructure, is that right? DPHI, Department of Housing, Infrastructure and whatever it is. Anyway, the department that you guys belong to, okay, you guys have lots of different operations, and in particular, Crown Lands has aerial inspection of fire trails. So that operation is unique compared to, say, give me another department. What's another department that you guys have worked for? Anyone?
National Parks.
Parks, okay.
They're in the cluster.
Sorry, what's that?
They're in the big cluster.
They're in the cluster, yeah. Oh, I'm thinking something like, say, Department of Housing. Okay. Is there a Department of Housing anymore? No? I'm looking for any generic department within New South Wales government. Give me a department besides Parks. Treasury. All right, Treasury. All right, okay, there's Treasury. Let's make it Treasury. What sort of risks do you think Treasury might have to deal with?
Other departments getting upset that they're not giving out enough money.
Yeah, that happens at every level. But let's say, for example, they have to manage a large infrastructure project that has, for whatever reason, is being overseen by Treasury. So they would have risks associated with, say, the financing of it. Whereas DPHI, Crown Lands, your risks are related to operating helicopters. So each organisation has their own specific risks. So Treasury says every agency has to look at their own risks, analyse their own risks for their operations, and put in place risk management processes that are applicable to your style of operations. Right, so for us in Crown Lands, this is what we have. We are going to be operating helicopters. We have contracted organisations that do that. So we look at aviation and we come up here to the top right-hand side and we see, there's an Act, Civil Aviation Act, which creates the Civil Aviation Safety Regulations. We talked about that this morning. We have the Manual of Standards, and then we have the Advisory Circular. So that's all the reference documentation with regards to risk management. And so the Manual of Standards will have things in there like fatigue risk management, which is important. Weight and balance management. So all that sort of stuff there is in the Manual of Standards, and all has to be taken into effect. Now, your operation requires you to contract a service provider. Heli Surveys is your current contractee. And so the contractor has their own approved operations manual. CASA approves it, and inside that, it's got risk management processes as well. So that then becomes an input as well. So as we come down this line here, the next agency that has a finger in the pie, next stakeholder, is the organisation that oversees all aviation operations within the state, and that is RFS. So Rural Fire Service has been given the job of overseeing and maintaining the standards of aviation within New South Wales. That's why they create the SOPs. So we have their risk management policy within RFS. We have the aviation SOPs, which we spoke about this morning, and we have the fire trail standards, the minimum standard for fire trails and how they need to be constructed. So all those are inputs into the creation of the Treasury mandated DPHI Crown Lands aviation risk management process that has been created so that you guys are compliant. That's how we came up with this concept. And if we follow this concept, we are compliant with everything upstream. Before I go on to the next slide, does anyone want me to clarify anything there, or does that make sense? All right, a lot of stunned looks there, so I'll assume that everyone is happy with that and we can continue on. Right, the next one. So the duties of officers and workers when it comes to workplace health and safety. The Act, both at Commonwealth and state level, says that an officer being someone who holds an office, includes gaining an understanding and the nature of operations and its hazards and risks, ensuring appropriate resources are available to eliminate and minimize risk, and ensure resources such as training are available like you are doing now. So if we go up the line within Crown Lands, we're looking at, say, George Snyder. Who does he answer to? Who's his boss? Is it the Deputy Secretary?
No, Greg Sullivan.
Our executive, then our executive report to the deputy.
Right. All right. So who's the executive that George reports to? Did you say Greg Sullivan?
Yeah.
Yep.
Has he ever done an aerial inspection of a fire trail before?
No, I don't believe Greg's come out.
Has he ever done work safely around aircraft? Has he ever done anything to do with aviation? Sorry?
He was in the army.
He's in the army? Oh, geez. That's two strikes against him.
He
But-
applies for work. He lives up in Queensland, I think, somewhere on the Gold Coast.
Does he?
He signs the form
Yeah.
for the program to go.
Yeah.
So he's just down the road. I should go down and have a chat to him.
Yeah.
So the thing is that he needs to have an understanding of exactly what you guys do. So that's part of the requirements of being an officer within the Workplace Health and Safety Act. So George would be briefing him and giving him an idea of this is what the campaigns consists of. These are the stakeholders. This is what we've been doing. So everyone up the chain needs to get an understanding of the nature of the operations, its hazards and risks, and everyone downstream are to ensure that they do these things to minimize or eliminate risk and make sure that training is available. So those are the duties of an officer. So are you guys, sorry, go ahead.
The minister's been up and flown.
Has he?
Yeah.
Shouldn't need to get him up to do a couple of trail surveys, hey?
Well,
they're
hopefully
doing it again
it's
this
more money.
Yeah, so that's right. Yeah. All right. So what are your roles and responsibilities then? So if you're a worker, this is some of the things that you need to do. First of all, number one, take reasonable care for your own safety, which is, you think it's common sense, but the only thing common about common sense is how uncommon it is. And then the next point there is comply with any reasonable instruction by the person conducting the business. So those are all the officers, and with any reasonable policy related to work, health, and safety. So the risk management process we're talking about now is one of those reasonable policies. So it is a requirement of the Act that you adhere to it. So one of the questions you had before there is about dealing with the pilots. Well, when you want to have a SMEAX brief or something similar, you say, in accordance with our risk management program, we are to conduct a SMEAX brief. Have a seat. Let's conduct the brief. Okay, because you need to be compliant. The next point that we make there is that what is a workplace? Well, workplace in accordance with the Act is a place where work is carried out in the common sense. So say an office or a construction site, etc., but can also be a vehicle, an aircraft, a vessel, or an installation. So your workplace, when you are doing a survey, is the aircraft. So you need to be compliant when you are doing all that sort of stuff. So I'll flick through these next slides a little bit on the quick side because I want to get down to the nitty gritty. So government says that you have to comply with ISO 31000:2018, and that's in the New South Wales Government Internal Audit and Risk Management Policy. And it also says in there that there is no need to reinvent the wheel. If there is already an existing risk management process in place, then you can adapt that as required. So the DPHI risk management policy, which you guys are to use as you are doing your campaigns, what we did was we established an enterprise-wide program in accordance with both ISO and the Treasury policy. It integrates the process into strategic, business, and program planning. So strategic is ministerial level, business level is George Schneider level, and program planning are your Scott Vale and Shane Guest level as you do your campaigns. So at all levels, we are integrating a risk management process. We ensure that any risks that could impact DPHI are assessed, monitored, and treated. And we identify any compliance with our legal obligations. And if we adhere to the process, then we are compliant. And we make sure that you guys as staff have the necessary tools to not only conduct the risk management process, but also to undertake the role, which includes training. Some of the outputs of this is that we have a risk register. All the things that we have identified as being risks, we have put into this register, and any new risks that we come across or that are created, then that goes into the risk register as well. We develop, maintain standard criteria and a basis for the risk management, and we promote an understanding of it and an effective culture at all levels. So the old document for DPE is the one that you see on the screen there, Risk Management Policy. And the DepSec Executive Director and Program Owners are responsible for implementing the policy. And they're accountable for their directorate or their division or their branch or their program. They have to make sure that there are enough resources available and that the risk registers are updated and maintained. And all employees must apply the policy and raise and escalate risks, concerns, or behaviours. Now, I just want to make mention of those last two dot points. What process do we use to update the risk register? How do we know when a new risk has been identified? What do we do? What do you guys do?
Incident reports and near misses.
That's right. Yeah. Do you still use CAMS or have you gone to something different? CAMS, okay. So CAMS is a good reporting tool, and incident reports and all those other things as well. So they should actually go into the risk register, and this is one of the requirements of the officers at all levels to understand how the risk register works, and then to make sure that they are appropriately updated and integrated into the process. So there is also another way that we can update that risk register, and this is why we look at this program that we've developed as being a means for that to occur at the tactical level being you guys in the aircraft. And let's see how it works. All right, so we just talked about that. All right, so here's the manual, and I think, Dan, that's you on the cover there, isn't it?
I'm afraid so.
Yeah, look at that. Looks like you know what you're doing too, mate.
Yeah, I'm winging it for the camera.
Yeah. Or rotoring it, as the case may be.
Oh, sorry.
Rotary winging it. All right, so the manual enables an understanding of risk management for the inexperienced. So Bo, you're new to the organisation. I have written this manual for people exactly like you. All right, so you're coming in, you're going to do in fact, it's probably a good idea for you to read this manual before you come and do the training in a couple of weeks. What it will do is we'll explain risk management, but also explain the concept of aerial inspections, explain the different risks that you should be aware of, and then explain the process to manage those risks. So I try to pitch it at the level of, say, a minister who's usually pretty stupid when it comes to this sort of stuff, or someone who's a graduate straight out of uni that's just come to join Crown Lands. So those sort of levels. So it provides the outsider an understanding of the role and associated risk management within Crown Lands and their aviation operations. And it gives the aerial inspection program manager, campaign manager, and the coordinator the tools required to carry out risk management and in order to be compliant with legislation. And for you guys as OICs and air observers, gives you guys as operators the tools to conduct risk management on a daily basis to mitigate those risks. And it also encourages leadership and teamwork. So if you undertake this process as part of your daily briefing, you actually are establishing your authority within the team and stamping it within the team as well. So if you do this process to comply with legislation, you are actually increasing your authority within the team. So the manual consists of the following. So part 0 is the introduction. Part 1 explains risk management. Part 2 looks at the responsibilities and legal requirements under the law. 3 looks at what scope, context, and criteria are and what activity is being done. And in this case, it is aerial inspection of fire trails. We look at the internal context, so that's internal to the team, and the external context, such as stakeholders and external agencies that all want a piece of Crown lands and its aviation operations. And we look at what information we want to come out of the activity, what data is being gathered. And the data we are gathering is the condition of those fire trails, and the information that that data feeds is which fire trails need to be upgraded before the fire season. Right? Those are the outputs of the activity. Part 3 also includes aviation rules and regs. Part 4 looks at the risk assessment part of it, in particular contexts and the criteria, how to identify the risks, and we analyze the risks and evaluate the risks. And we then talk about risk registers. Part 5 is treating the risks to minimize them and who's responsible for accepting risks. And part 6 is the communicating and reviewing those risks and how we brief other people within the team, management, and up and down the chain. And part 7 are the templates and the tools to comply. So the whole manual should have everything that you need to understand the context and be able to identify risk and then use the process. So the risk management process facilitates an understanding of those things. Oh, in fact, I've just talked about all that. Yep. All right. Done that. All right. So when I talk about communication pathways, I talk about vertical and I'll talk about lateral or horizontal. So when we look at communication, we have to understand who needs to know what. So over here on the right in this blue rectangle, we have our aerial inspection team. We have our team leader, who's the OIC, mission commander, whatever you want to call him or her. And then we have the team members, the observer and the data input operator. So when you guys are communicating, that's internal to the team. We have another stakeholder who's actually also a member of the extended team, and that would be, or stakeholders, and that would be the pilot, the refueler, and the operations manager of the contracting company. Right. So we have our own internal communication and we have lateral communication with external stakeholders. So that is horizontal and internal communication. If we are going to be communicating upwards, so you as a team leader, who would you be communicating with when you're conducting a campaign, when you're doing inspections upwards?
Coordinator,
Okay, and who are the coordinators that you've worked with?
George, Scott. Yeah.
Just those two?
Yeah,
Sean.
I think Shane's going to be one this year. Cindy, you may have done it.
Sean.
Yeah, it's the person who's organising accommodation and all those sorts of things for us.
That's right. The campaign coordinator. That's right. Exactly right. So that's vertical. And that person then would report upwards to say if George, if George wasn't it, and then George would report upwards. So that's vertical communication. Now let's say we are going upwards to say George, up past the campaign coordinator to George. Who would be some of the stakeholders that he would be speaking to laterally, do you think?
Media team.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Yeah. Or colleagues in the RFS. The RFS might want to join in on your campaign. Yeah. So that's lateral communication. Now, so going from the team and we go downwards. So let's say the team in this case includes the pilot. Well, downwards communication would be, say, to people that are supporting the operation. So that'd be, say, the refueler, telling the refueler what we need that person to do in order for the aircraft to be serviced, supported, etc. So that's vertical and lateral communication and internal communication. So the diagram on the left there sort of explains a bit more where the threats may occur. So within the inner dashed box, we have our aviation team. So on the left here, we have Crown Lands Division Aerial Inspection Program personnel. So that's your OIC, your observer, your data entrer. And on the right here, we have the contracted service provider, the pilot, the refueler. If you have an engineer with you, the operations manager. So I've got here internal threats. So what do you think some internal threats may be that might have a negative impact on your mission from within those the groups I just articulated?
Fatigue.
Yep, fatigue. Yeah, yep. Anything else?
Illness.
Yep.
Poor communication.
Yeah, caused by what do you think, Cindy?
Misunderstandings, something not being clear.
Yep.
Something changing that maybe hasn't been relayed properly.
Yep. Okay. There's
Not
a barrier.
speaking up.
Sorry, what was that?
Not speaking up.
Yeah, so sort of being a bit submissive, yeah. And another common one is where there is a bit of animosity between individuals as well, where communication is deliberately not passed on because they just don't want to talk to each other. So these are all just part of the human condition. So we're talking about different barriers to communication as well. They could be psychological or they could be physiological as well. Okay, so those are some internal threats: fatigue, stress, lack of communication, la, 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 la. Looking at the orangey rings, we have the Crown Lands context, because you all work for Crown Lands. You all work for Department of Planning, Housing and Infrastructure, DPHI, that's right. It used to be DPE. And you're all part of New South Wales government. So it's like an onion. There's onion skins going layers and layers and layers. On the right-hand side there, we have the contracted service provider. And then we have the regulators, CASA. So they're all parts or answerable to those organizations. So those now become external threats. So for example, New South Wales government, the minister may be a threat. How can the minister be a threat to your operation?
He may pull the funding and say, no, you can't do it.
Yep, yeah, or it might reduce the funding. That's right, yeah. Anything else? What's a common one that you guys have to put up with all the time? It's not normally from the minister, it's from the minister's communications people.
Dealing with media.
Yeah, PR, which is a bit of a pain because they need to keep the messaging going out there. So you could actually have a threat coming down directly from the minister's office or people working directly from the minister, and they are significantly far removed from you guys being in the air looking at fire trails. So some other external threats. So we have these circles down the bottom here as some other external threats. So external stakeholder threats. Landowners may not necessarily want you flying over their property. You know, maybe they've got their prize gelding that they don't want scared. Or it could be RFS wants to throw a couple of their people on board your aircraft. So that's an external stakeholder threat. You can have environmental threats, bad weather. That's an environmental threat. Or operating in and out of difficult terrain where there could be power lines strung across gullies. We have our technical threats, so problems of a technical nature that impact on the mission. Could be to do with the aircraft. Maybe the refueling equipment's not working properly, or it's out of date, or we don't have good fuel. And then we have the human threats, bystanders, rubberneckers, people who want to take a pot shot at the aircraft, you know, just for fun, or use a laser on it or something similar. So all these are different threats. And so when we do our missions, we need to identify where the threats are going to come from. Are they internal to the team, internal to the organization, or external to the organization, but part of the hierarchy? Or are they going to be threats that come from outside those things? External stakeholders, environment, technical, etc. When we look at it from that point of view, we can start identifying the risks, and then we can start putting controls in place. So when we look at the methodology of putting controls in place, on the right-hand side there, we have the hierarchy of controls for risks. Number one on the hit parade is eliminate the threat. All right. So let's say that the threat in this case is going to be a PR session with a local RAG, which has the potential to impact on our ability to finish all the trails on a particular day. what actually let's hang on, let's make it a bit different. Let's make it more of an operational threat. Let's say it's a forced landing. Okay, forced landing leading to a requirement to assume a crash position. What is the threat? The threat is forced landing at low level. Can we eliminate that threat?
If it's not something to do with the helicopter going wrong, then you can have a look around and see all those all the warning signs that indicate that there may be a problem and try and avoid them.
I think the threat here is we're flying at low level. Can we eliminate the threat or associated with low level flight? Probably not, because we need to be at low level to look at the fire trails. So we can't do that. So we need, the threat is the helicopter going unserviceable whilst you're flying at low level, resulting in a hard landing or a crash. We can't eliminate it. Can we substitute the threat? Well, maybe we can put up a drone instead. But what's the problem with putting up a drone to do fire trail inspections?
Yeah,
Too much distance.
I beg your pardon?
Too much distance.
Too much distance? Yeah. Look, usually it's better to have human eyeballs looking at the target as opposed to having an electrical optical package. And plus, drones don't have the same endurance that helicopters do. So drones are great, but only in small doses, and it'd be impractical to use a drone to look at fire trails and get the same output as putting three sets of warm bodies, or three sets of eyeballs into a helicopter that can look at things and make decisions on the spot. They were looking at using drones for doing power line work. So the drones would then come back with lots and lots and lots of thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands of images. And then someone had to sit down and go through every single image. It actually ended up being less productive than putting a person in a helicopter and going up and actually physically looking at each of the items in the helicopter. So drones are great, but they're not the cure-all. So we can't substitute the threat. Can we isolate the threat of a hard landing due to low flying? Yes, we can, by only flying at low level when we need to. So we minimize the time that we are at low level where we have that threat. Can we engineer a solution? So a solution to a hard landing? Yeah. So we actually have crash survivability on aircraft. The skids are designed to absorb a hard landing. Can we also minimize or control the threat through training and administration? Definitely. Yeah. And the last thing, we have PPE. So what do we wear to help to minimize the outcomes of a hard landing? Helmets, boots, harnesses, all that sort of stuff. So that's the hierarchy of risk controls. You just have to identify the risk, put it into context, and then figure out how you can control it and down to what level. So one of the standards for analyzing risk is to use something similar to this. So we have in this second column here, we have the threat, also known as a hazard. We have the likelihood of that threat being realized. We have the consequent if that threat is realized, and then we have a risk rating. So what we do is we give a value to the likelihood and the consequence, and by multiplying that or conducting some other form of algorithmic process to it, we come up with a risk rating. And this risk rating is where people who are experts will sit down and say, well, for our operation, that's an acceptable risk, or that's not an acceptable risk. So it has to be someone who's conversant with the nature of the operation. And when I say an expert, it's just someone who's experienced. So let's have a look at one of them. The first one here, the threat is the number of Crown Lands personnel who are physically and psychologically able to be trained are not sufficient for the purpose. And there's not enough personnel available for flights due to shortages or absences. What's the likelihood of that? Unlikely, because you've got enough people. The consequence is moderate, because you can always have extra people just doing longer times in the air. So the control is we have sufficient. I beg your pardon? Sorry, did someone say something? No? Okay. The control here is sufficient personnel are located and trained from various regions in the state, and management personnel such as George, such as Scott, such as Shane, they remain current and able to backfill when you have a shortage of observers or OICs. Another control could be other agencies with the same skill sets can actually be called upon. Maybe RFS can have a few people that have the appropriate level of skills and they could be called upon. So those are the controls that have been put in place. We then have a look at the scores of the likelihood and the consequence. So where the likelihood initially was unlikely, now they've put those controls in place, the likelihood is rare. No changes to the consequence, but the risk level remains low. It's just actually it's a lower than low. But let's have a look at here we go. This one here, this threat. The aerial survey program generates interest from external stakeholders, leading to requests for DPHI to undertake further tasks which impacts on the survey program. So that could be RFS asking for you guys to do some stuff on behalf of them. Maybe they want you to have a look at some trails or parks and wildlife. Maybe they want you to have a look at some of the trails in the parks jurisdiction rather than Crown lands. What sort of impact does that have on your campaign?
No, that's already happening right now, Conway.
Oh yeah, is that right?
Yeah.
And what's the impact of that?
A couple of the crew are standing down on day 3 because we have the minister coming in and possible treasury to fly out to trails, so they actually get an understanding of what we do, and meeting soil conservances and their minister out on site,
Right.
so they get an understanding of what the fire trails are. Day 2 has now been changed as well because we have RFS now flying with us and having an understanding of or a view of the inspection program, and they're trying to jump on the helicopter at other times around the state as well. So organisation and rostering.
So what's happening now is that your administrative liability has gone up. Your productivity has decreased for the number of hours you're going to be flying to get that information, which means that you now have to extend your campaign by the number of days that you have now wasted because of external stakeholders. So that is a risk to your campaign. So the likelihood is likely, and you've just indicated that it is. The consequence is moderate, and the inherent risk rating becomes high. So there are some controls you can put in place. You can, what do they call it? Manage expectations by external stakeholders, or you can give them a hurt statement, or you can request extra funding, or you can get another aircraft provider, if you've got extra funding, to do the job so that you can continue on your planned campaign. And if you can do that, the likelihood then becomes possible. The consequence remains the same, but your risk rating has gone from a high down to a medium. So can you see the concept of risk management and how it works? All right.
Mhm.
So to that end, let's have a look at the pro forma and the process that we have come up with in order to abide by the regs, but also to keep that communication flow. So what we have is a Crown Lands Flight Authorization form, and it works in the following way. The mission commander, OIC, confers with the pilot at the beginning of the day regarding the day's targets, the fire trials you want to inspect, the weather, and any other issues. The OIC fills out the first 2 sections, so the grey section up here and then the green section, based on talking to the pilot. Then you carry out the crew brief with the entire team, so the observers and the refueler. The OIC, or the mission commander, then completes the 3rd section, which is the salmon pink section, and then sends it to the campaign coordinator either electronically, so if you do it a PDF and you got your smart device, or I've designed it so that you can take a photograph of it and then MMS it to the campaign coordinator. In any case, the campaign coordinator sitting back in Newcastle, Wagga, wherever he or she may be, gets an idea of what's happening for that day and then can start acting. So straight away what we've done is we've got a brief between the OIC and the pilot. We have a brief between the OIC, the pilot, and the crew. And then we have a brief going to the campaign coordinator. So there's your communication, internal, lateral, and vertical. The campaign coordinator then reviews it and conducts any follow-up. For example, if something has been identified as being an issue, the campaign coordinator is now on top of it. And let's say it's Scotty Vale. Scott can then ring up, say, Bo, when you're an OIC, he'll ring up Bo and say, hey, Bo, you've done this flight authorization form and you've identified this issue here. Let's talk about it and come up with a solution. So now we've got that communication flow going vertically downwards as well. After the day's flying, you have a debrief. The OIC, the mission commander, completes the last section right here down the bottom here, the yellow section, and then sends it to the campaign coordinator. And if it's sent electronically, then that just gets filed in the system on top of the earlier one. So it should actually just go straight on top. And so what information are we looking at? Oh, sorry, and that becomes a record of the day's activity. So if you actually end up having a problem later on down the track, maybe a landowner complains, you can go back and have a look at the day's record of activities and say, right, on this day, these people were in that aircraft. This is what they were doing. Oh, here's the word picture from the debrief that they did scare that horse on that property. Now we know what's happened. Okay, we can accept responsibility for that. Or if there's any questions, then we know who to speak to. So here's the first two sections that are filled out by the OIC after speaking with the pilot. Who is the crew and their contact details? Shift details, the day number for that particular inspection team and their handover. If there are any media requirements for that day, and then the section 2 is the green section, details on what trails you're expecting to inspect, and any anticipated landing site, as well as the forecast weather. So in this case here, we have the mission number or area to be worked. So it's Wagga Wagga Region South. The date as year, month, and day in reverse. Mission commander or OIC, pilot in command, AV ATA. Air Observer 1 is Tim Looker. Air Observer 2 is Dave Peaker. Other crew, so someone from an RFS, a firefighter. And the ground support personnel is Reg Fuller, refueler. It's inspection day number 2. Is there a handover required at the end of the day? Like, is there going to be a staff changeover? No. Is there going to be an immediate? Yes. And if yes, the location, the approximate time at the Rock, which is a place near Wagga, 10:30 a.m. and the organisation is the Wagga Advertiser. Section 2, trails to be inspected. All trails between the Rock, Tarcutta and Wagga Township. And anticipated landing sites, the Rock, and the reason, refuel and the media opportunity. Landing at Tarcutta, that'll be refuel and lunch, and then a landing at Wagga at the end of the day's inspection. The weather from the pilot brief, some cloud with light showers, visibility greater than 10 kilometers, winds light and variable. So that information there can now be communicated to the rest of the members of the team. So now they understand what's going on for the day. So just reiterate, OIC, pilot, talk, and the OIC should then be able to fill out these two sections. Now I'm going to stop for a second and I'm going to go back to you guys. For the last 2 years, you should have been using this in that particular method. Is this different from your actual day's briefings? So Dan Cross, you've been out of the game for a couple of years.
That's right. So better to hear from Cindy and the others.
Yeah.
What they've been doing the last 2 years. It is different.
Okay. So
we are using that form. We've got all the contact details are in there and where we're intending to go, what the mission is for the day.
Yeah.
So it mostly covers a lot of the things that you do for your SMACs.
beautiful. Okay, no, that's good. So you have been using it in that format, and I can see Shane holding them up there.
I can guarantee it.
Okay, good stuff. All right. Well, I'm glad that all the work that I put into it hasn't been for naught.
No, it's a good form.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Look at you. You're going to make me want to go out and start creating forms for a job. All right. So after you do your crew brief with the other members of the team, this is where you get a chance to sort of figure out, are there any concerns that they may have? And we fill out the second part, or the third part after the crew brief. So section 3 would be filled out after the crew brief when the OIC mission commander has been able to speak with the other members of the crew. So the first thing is any risk management or safety issues that have been identified and any administrative issues or requests. So let's say that the refueler has come back and said, our pump is not working properly because we have some leaks in the seals. However, we can still use it for the day because I can manage those leaks. It's only a minor leak, but we will need to get it replaced. So other risk management would be no hot refueling, and you shouldn't be doing that with hand pumps anyway. So no hot refueling, and maybe you just make sure that you don't get any leakages of the fuel out of those seals, wrap some rags around it, and then allow those rags to dry and evaporate. And we'll put it here, fuel pump for hand refueling requires new seals. We can manage the risk to personal and environment until a new pump is obtained. The next part there is any administrative issues or requests. In this case here, we need extra accommodation for an RFS observer who is due to arrive tonight. Please check with aviation support company, so heli surveys, when we can expect to get the new fuel pump. So the campaign coordinator knows straight away that he or she needs to do some stuff on behalf of the inspection team. Accommodation for RFS and the new fuel pump, check with the aviation provider. And then the final things are, is the crew fit for the mission? Yes. Briefings complete? Yes. Will the duty day extension be requested? No. So now the campaign coordinator is all over it. That person may want to ring up the team and say, hey, where should I get the fuel pump delivered to? Or no, sorry, where do you want the accommodation for?
I can give you a few examples, Conley.
Oh yeah, please do. Go ahead.
One, poor visibility.
Oh, that's a risk. Okay, yep, good.
Yep. One, end of shift fatigue.
Okay, good one. Excellent. I like that.
One, fire trail too close to houses. Illegal to fly helicopters closer than 300 meters. So
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure.
No, that's not entirely correct. First of all, it's supposed to be 150 meters. So remember that, that low flying rule is actually to do with vertical separation, but 150 meters is lateral separation. But in that case there, there's things that you could be done. What could be done to mitigate that?
Fly higher,
I beg your pardon?
have a higher elevation.
Yeah, you do it from high. Yes, yeah. Anything else?
Notify residents.
Notify residents, and normally that is done. Or you just say this particular section of the fire trail has to be just inspected from the ground. Yeah. Or if you know you're going to have to go past there, you just ask them, the local brigade, to go out there and just do a door knock. Say, hey, we're going to fly a helicopter past here. Don't be concerned. Are you guys happy for that to occur? Yeah.
Save the best one for last, mate.
Go ahead.
Permission to fly in restricted airspace.
Sorry, there's no clearance to fly in restricted airspace?
Yeah, denied permission to fly in restricted airspace.
Oh, okay, right. Okay. There you go.
There was another one on a different year where it wasn't one of mine, but I think the accommodation for the day fell through. I think when they went to book the accommodation, there was a event on in the town. Yep. So there was actually no accommodation available. So they had to go somewhere else. So they had to reconfigure where they were going to fly, when they were going to finish, when they were going to start.
There you go. Excellent. All right. And so were you the campaign coordinator for that one, Cindy?
No, I was just aware of it.
Okay.
That was George, and that was last year, and it was school holidays. So the program ran into the school holidays. And where they were coming in, all accommodation was booked. So they had to divert.
Yep.
So, took it as an assessment, and we will not fly during school holidays. So the program came forward this year.
There you go. So you just added that risk to the risk register, hey?
Yep.
There you go. I'm like, you guys are all over this. Why am I even doing this? It looks like you're experts at it. All right. That being the case, but Bo, this is basically for you, mate. This is so you can see how people are doing the job. Right. At the end of the day, you do your debrief. and this is the back brief that goes back to the campaign coordinator. So in this case here, we have handover completed. Yes. Did the mission run as planned? Yes. And hours flown. Checked with the pilot in command. 6.6 hours. And then we have a word picture. Mission went well. All trails surveyed. Weather not a problem. PEDs need a software update, but still usable. Local paper did interview with self and pilot. Photos taken for local newspaper and online. Dan Cross will be on the front page of the Wagga Advertiser. Point of contact is Jane Journo at Wagga Advertiser. So the
Thank you.
campaign, sorry?
Oh, I just love it, Jane Journo.
Jane Journo.
I love the names. Thank you.
No worries. And so now the campaign coordinator gets that. Beautiful. Love it. So my team is now in their pajamas and they're in bed. There's no action that I need to take. Everything went well. And there's that communication going up and down the chain. Look, just from what Cindy, what you just told me, and also Shane, what you've just described to me, it looks like you're all over this process. It warms the cockles of my heart that this concept, this process that I came up with is actually working for you, and it's keeping you compliant. Do you guys have any suggestions on how it can be made better, or do you have any questions at all before we have a break?
I'd just like to mention in the after action review, everyone being open and honest with no ramifications of actually speaking up has helped me improve the program itself, because everyone's suggestions and stuff like that, it gives me a target of actually what to improve, look at, fix, manage, or change for the next year. So I think one of the biggest ones last year was, I was only given about 4 weeks to run the program, and oh my God, was it a nightmare. So I looked on it as myself as let's improve it. There is a 12-week lead-in program now to this happening. So I contact everyone earlier. And the biggest part of that was Rob from Heli Surveys needed to notify those restricted airspaces 8 weeks before.
Right.
I only got the flight path 4 weeks before last year. Now he's gotten it 10 weeks out. So that was really cool.
It sounds to me like it might have been military restricted airspace, was it?
Yeah, the northwest of Richmond and the Williamstown.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, guys, let's take a 10-minute break. We may have to go to 3:30. Does anyone have any problems with that? If you need to go early, by all means do so. But we'll finish off.
Fine.
Okay, so it's now 2:30. Let's say back here at 2:40. We'll finish off with no stopping for teams.